briefing meeting underway. Thanks to everyone for being here. Are there any questions about any items on the agenda or any other items that commissioners would like to have on the agenda for the briefing meeting? And any questions or changes to the agenda for the meeting this evening? Anything? So we could vote on it this evening, but just change the dates? Is that what the staff would prefer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's plan on that. All right. All right, well, great. The first item on our agenda is the presentation on the Buncombe County lift applications. And Tim Love is here to help us out with this.
Good afternoon, commissioners.
Good afternoon.
All right, so we've got a presentation to assist us today. The purpose of this presentation is discuss a LIFT grant application that would be submitted to the Tourism Development Authority. And we've got some details on kind of the LIFT and where it came from and what that means, but then we'll kind of walk through some examples, potential projects, and then ultimately looking for commissioners to kind of weigh in a little bit today on the direction that we take. So in terms of LIFT, so LIFT stands for the Legacy Investment from Tourism Fund. This fund was created in July of 2022 when the occupancy tax changed. The primary change, if you remember, from July 2022 was the changing of the percentages from 75-25 to 66-33 in terms of the marketing and community capital projects portions. But additionally, this new fund was created called LIFT. And since this is the first cycle of LIFT, I think the TDA and in discussions about the fund has been pretty clear that this will be a learning process for them. They're curious to see kind of what applications come in. And so we'll see how that goes. But from the statutes and from the guidance that we've received from the TDA that they've published with the application, we know that LIFT could support these bullets that are on the screen. And some of these bullets are traditional items that we've seen with the Tourism Product Development Fund, or TPDF, which has been around for a number of years. But some of the newer items are towards the bottom of that list of bullets, and I've italicized them. And so you'll see some of the newer items, which I'll focus on, which I think are different than what we've seen in the past. So specifically, maintenance of a tourism-related capital project, historically not something that was included as a part of TPDF, which was more focused on new capital projects. Additionally, the design of tourism-related projects, which typically was not included, so thinking about designing and engineering the front end of a project. Also project administration, so thinking about a project manager that's going to deliver the capital project. But also some new items here related to the enhancement of natural resources and the expansion of necessary infrastructure. And so, this is new language that's been pushed out by the TDA via the statutes, and really interesting, we think, is a unique opportunity for us in this cycle as a county and as a community to participate in the application process. So in terms of the deadlines for this cycle, the cycle opened on October 31st. Again, this is the first time this has ever been done. Phase 1 applications are requested by December 1st, so that's just around the corner. And then similar to the TPDF cycles that have been with us for a number of years, there's kind of a Phase 1 review where those projects are kind of filtered and questions are asked, and then a request or an invitation to come back for a Phase 2 application. And that Phase 2 is meant to be more detailed. So just kind of getting a sense in Phase 1 of what projects are out there, and then in Phase 2 really digging into the details. Based on this timeline, which was pushed out by the TDA, we'd expect decisions to be made in April of 2024. So, decisions moving pretty quickly in the new calendar year. So that's our cycle. In terms of potential projects that Buncombe County could pursue, what we wanted to do was start first with a slide that talked about kind of what we've talked about with y'all over the past few years. And so this table, titled Previously Proposed Projects for TPDF, includes a number of projects that we've talked about with you either in this briefing setting, but also in budget retreats. And so what we've done here, the first two items are kind of new items that haven't been met, and so we'll talk about those. And then the bottom three are items that we've discussed with this board that actually have been funded. And so I'll go ahead and knock those out. The first one we see is the Buncombe County Sports Park Recreation Destination Phase 2. So this refers to Turf and Lights, our second phase of that. That was awarded in this most recent TPDF cycle, and so that's funded by the TDA. That's our second time going through that cycle for ENCA Recreation. Additionally, the McCormick Field project, which of course is a city-owned project, but was heavily supported by the TDA. And then finally, the Woodfin Greenway and Blueway, which was supported in last year's cycle. And so all of these projects have been funded. They were priorities for this board, but there's still items that haven't been funded that this board has an interest in, we think. And so those are the items we're going to talk about today. And so at the top, you can see affordable housing development. We've discussed this as a potential, recurring funding towards projects. Additionally, we've talked with y'all and the TDA about the Ferry Road Destination, which is a large-scale project that includes housing, conservation, and recreation components. And so those are the two items that are kind of at the top of our list and that we wanted to talk about with y'all today. Our focus today would be to bring forward the Ferry Road project. We think there's a lot of opportunity within this project for lots of community partners, including the TDA, to participate. And so we've talked about this with y'all probably ad nauseum at this point, but who can resist an opportunity to talk about some of the highlights? And so the key community features that we're talking about, 645 units, of which 55% would be affordable. So this is first and foremost a housing project, always has been. However, there are some key components of this project that we think make it special, unique, and set an example, but also make it possible for partners to support us on this project. And so the property in total is 137 acres. We're seeking to conserve 60% of it, which equates to 72 acres. Additionally, by protecting those 72 acres, we preserve our river frontage as well as tributaries on the site, as well as one ecologically significant floodplain wetland. Additionally, we would deliver a community green, 5 pocket parks that ends up being a couple acres of additional parks in addition to the conserved lands. 2 miles of greenways, approximately 2 miles of trails, 3 trailheads with parking spaces so that the public can access those trails. A community services center, which is approximately 20,000 square feet and could be the home of a future early childhood education center or a clinic or some other type of community service that we think is really important for those that are living in this Ferry Road community. Finally, you've heard me talk about this, but I think it's really important to mention overall bringing it together, this concept of equitable development and the idea that we can have affordable housing side by side with amenities that we would expect in developments of higher means. And so those exact type of opportunities are conserved space or parks that we often don't see in developments that are designed for those that are low to moderate income. And we think this is a key component. So in general, this project has a lot of opportunities in it between the housing, the affordable housing, between the conserved property, between the recreational amenities, between the wetland preservation. There's just a ton of opportunity for this project in our community to make a difference and check a lot of the boxes that this commission has established through its strategic plan, through its comprehensive plan, through its racial equity action plan. But it's also an opportunity for our partners to step in with us and move forward with us. So, a really cool project, a big project. We've seen these numbers before. Big, cool projects don't come without cost. And so we know that this project in general, when we talk about the public and the private investment, anywhere between above $200 million in investment in today's dollars. Of that, we estimate that the potential county investment, and this is on the front end, we haven't had partners participate with us yet, But we estimate a county net investment of $34 million, which is substantial. But what that means is that's approximately 16% of the total cost coming from Buncombe County. That number, of course, goes down if we can, expand the tent and have additional participation. But what I'd also remind us is that the majority of this cost, that $34 million, comes from subsidizing affordable housing on the site. That's overwhelmingly the biggest driver of cost. However, there are other costs related to recreation, conservation, the infrastructure to access the site. But overwhelmingly, this is a project that delivers housing, affordable housing, and then conservation as well as public recreation. So I've kind of summarized where we're at with Ferry Road. Y'all have heard it from us before. Our proposed application going into this lift cycle, and would like commissioner input today, would be to push forward the Ferry Road Community Project, which is a project that features affordable housing, conservation, and public recreation. We feel that this project clearly aligns with LIFT guidance that has been established. We also recognize that this is a process. It's our first cycle. Things will change. Things will be learned. But as we look at the Ferry Road project, we feel very clearly that this is the construction and design of a new tourism-related capital project that enhances natural resources and expands upon necessary infrastructure. And this is all language that I pulled from that very first slide where we talked about what we thought the LIFT Fund could accomplish. And so I wanted to call out those specific words because I think it's true. The key features of this community, just summarizing one last time, mixed income housing with an emphasis on affordability, conserved acreage, and public trails and greenways. Our recommendation for this ask is $6 million out of this current grant cycle. So with that said, I've talked a lot. I would like to open it up for commissioner discussion at this point. I've also got some next steps that I can walk through when y'all are ready, but at this point, would love to hear from y'all.
Great, Tim. Thanks so much. Great presentation. Any questions, commissioners?
I'll just share that I support the proposal, and I think it's well aligned, as you've pointed out.
Do you know approximately how much funding is going to be in the LIFT bucket?
It's approximately $10 million.
Okay. For this cycle?
Correct. But as with other cycles, if those funds aren't fully expended, they'll move into a future year, and additional funds will be added as the tax is collected over time.
Okay.
So future years could be bigger.
But assuming that the overall revenue stays similar, or maybe some modest growth year to year, around 10 million with some growth, that's kind of like the current forecasted for the annual revenues in the LIFT bucket.
That's correct to my understanding, and always dependent on the trends in our market. But yes.
Okay, but the LIFT fund is not 100% of the overall tourism product development fund, right? So how much is in the overall non-advertising?
The total bucket. So it's about each is 7.5%, I believe, is what it is. So it ends up being about $20 million across the TPDF and the LIFT. Don't quote me on exact numbers, but that's roughly it.
Right. So I'm really excited we're doing this. We've had a few informal meetings with folks on the TDA over the last, really it's been a conversation over the last year or two, and we've been encouraging them to, in addition to these other projects we've worked on together, to say, we should be looking at how we could collaborate on affordable and workforce housing for the benefit of their industry, because people who work in the tourism industry can't thrive if their workforce can't afford to live in the community. And there's been interest in this, and we've outlined how what the county's affordable housing strategy looks like with the passage of the bonds and how we're deploying those investments, and how there's a great pipeline of projects being supported now and planned for, including these projects on county-owned land. So TDA's never invested in affordable or workforce housing in the past, so this would be a new thing. And but I think from those conversations, part of what we heard was no specific commitment, of course, but like bring a specific project forward, right? Instead of just saying, hey, invest, for example, we put the idea out there, like, we should invest $2 million a year in this need. Their response has been, well, bring a specific project forward that we can actually sort of react to, to kind of, so I think this is, it's a great project, and I think it's a great project to bring forward for the first time for consideration through this process. So I'm excited we're doing it. Obviously, this, as Tim has said, it's more than just affordable and workforce housing. It's going to be this great new public park and trails and greenways and preservation and riverfront access. So, so I'm all for it. I would also say I think that is, hopefully this is successful. And as we think about other projects going forward, this does seem like a much better way than just sort of proposing a lump sum of money towards the need, right? Because I think they do have to fund specific projects. So I would sort of, I think as maybe someone who kind of floated that idea out there at one time, I would say this is the right approach, I think. And my hope would be it's successful, would be one of the most significant affordable and workforce housing projects ever built in Buncombe County. And it'll be an amazing place for people to live and go hang out and play in the woods. And hopefully we can bring other projects like this forward in next year's cycle and the one after. Obviously, we've got other cool county-owned property that we want to develop as mixed-use projects as well. And so this could be the start of something really, really neat. Other questions or thoughts?
Tim, thanks for your work on this, and I'm really supportive. I think we're hitting several of the key areas that we're supportive of, not just housing, but conservation and greenways as well. So it's exciting to see all those pieces that are important to each of us, but to the county as a whole, coming together for one ask. So thanks for all the work you've done to get us here.
Yeah, Tim, thanks. I think it was an excellent presentation. And I read most of it in this morning's paper. It was good. They talked about, affordable housing. It was a good article and positive article. But I think finally what I like about this, government can practice what it preaches. I've watched for years affordable housing here in Asheville, and I've complained about it for years because we have not accomplished what we said we were going to do. I mean, the private ones and all. I can go on and give you an encyclopedia of what was wrong with affordable housing in Asheville. But I think finally we have a project that I hope can set the stage going forward so that we give a good example of doing it the right way. And that's what I like about the project, and I've liked from the beginning. And hopefully we'll get other partners on board, and I feel we will, because they will see, I think everybody will see the value of this project. And it's excellent. I think great. But like I said, this is one of the ones that, I feel comfortable about because we've had a lot that I sure don't. And if you look at them and what's happened as a result of them, they don't work. I mean, we just don't do our homework.
I'll echo that. Thanks, Tim. I know a lot of work went into this behind the scenes, so I really appreciate staff's work on this, and especially you spearheading that effort.
Right, and just last thought is like, this is on, the county has kind of led the way on this. It's obviously on county-owned property with an interesting history. Most of the local governments in the region have owned this property at some point. I hope we're the last one. But it is a big project, and I know that I know the city's looking at a number of projects they want to advocate for. But I would say this is a big project. We could use all the help we can get. The county is willing to lead the way and do most of the heavy lifting on this, but it could absolutely be a partnership with TDA. It's in the city limits, so I know we're going to need to go to the city and talk to them about the land use piece of it. But this does not just have to be a county project. It can absolutely be a partnership project with ownership from a lot of different parts of our community. So, all right, if there's anything else on this, then all right, Tim, thanks so much. Do you have some more?
I just want to go through next steps real
Sure, yeah.
quick.
Go for it.
Just very brief. If we could pull up the slides, Nick and team. Just a few very brief next steps. So, you know, our Phase 1 application for this LIFT grant cycle will go in on December 1st, so that's right around the corner. But a key component that Chair Newman just mentioned, we are going through the City of Asheville's rezoning process for this property because it is located in the City of Asheville, although it's county-owned. And so what we expect to see is an application going into the TRC in January, so Technical Review Committee. From there, we would be before Planning and Zoning sometime in February and hope to be in front of City Council in March of 2024. So right around the corner, but all of these are requirements to get the property rezoned. The reason we want to rezone it is so that we can drive the density, which allows us to create the affordability. So that's a mandatory component of this. Finally, we will release a developer solicitation once we have the property rezoned, and so that's spring of 2024. But those are our next steps. We'll continue working. If anything changes, we'll let you know. Also want to thank y'all. This is a big and bold project. It doesn't move forward without leadership from y'all, so I appreciate it. Thank y'all.
And Commissioners, as Tim laid out those timelines to go into the City Council, I would love to have your support with us as staff goes and presents to City Council to make sure that we continue that leadership on this project. So we'll put those dates on your calendar when we have to go present.
Sounds great. All right, very good. All right, next up is the Community Reparations Commission update and extension request, and DK Wesley's here to help us out with this.
Good afternoon, Chair Newman and Commissioners. I'm here before you out of sequence. We typically provide a quarterly update on Reparations Commission, but with the holidays coming and the limited number of meetings, we wanted to make sure that we had this discussion with you without delay so that we can also report back to the Community Reparations Commission and the community. So today I will talk a little bit about the timeline, the project, where we've been, and how we expect to move forward. I want to share a little bit about county staff support and resource support. In the past, I've shared with you all that the county provides in-kind support for this commission, but I want to take a little bit more time today to share what that looks like in practice. We'll review our communication and public engagement, what we've done thus far and what we expect to do going into the new year, and then discuss the extension request from the Community Reparations Commission to extend the project an additional 8 months, and as well as a response. And then we'll end with some next steps. So this is the timeline for the project, and though the resolutions were passed in early 2020, the commission started to convene in April of 2022. I wanted to point your attention to the resolution that the Board of Commissioners passed in 2020. Oftentimes we move and we start implementing the work, but we don't always look back to that. I think Avril and I look back pretty much regularly to make sure that we are implementing the board's vision. But in that resolution, you all resolved to appoint to the Asheville City Council Commission, members to that commission, and then that staff would participate in that work. As resolved, you made your appointments, and staff has participated fully since that time. I also want to bring to your attention the other part of that resolution, and that was pretty clearly directing staff to continue the work that we were doing around equity, emphasizing racial equity. And I'll just share a little bit. It talked about apologizing to Black Buncombe County, resolving to make appointments as well. And then it went on further to say that county staff, including the newly formed Equity and Inclusion Work Group, will continue to prioritize racial equity in the implementation of your strategic plan, included but not limited to many of the priority areas that most of you work on directly, things like expanding early childhood education, reducing disparities in the criminal justice system, as well as health disparities, also looking at how we can build generational wealth in our county. So I wanted to point that to make clear that those are things that you all directed to do, and outside of the reparations conversation, we're continuing to work on those things. The remainder of this timeline just speaks to some of the actions that have come forward over the last 2 to 3 years. This body made a initial commitment of $2 million to the Reparations Commission's work, and then after that, committed an additional $500,000 each year with a 2% increase. So that reparation funding is about $2.5 million to date. Also, you all approved the implementation of an independent audit to ensure that our internal policies and procedures were indeed working to integrate racial equity. That audit is in progress and on track. It's about $88,000 when you consider the fund, the 50% match with the city of Asheville. So I want to spend a little time to just personally acknowledge the staff, county staff who have been participating on this work. As I mentioned previously, though the commission started in April of 2022, we've been working hand in hand with the city of Asheville for 2 to 3 years to plan for this work and support it moving forward. The city of Asheville, of course, because it's their commission, created the container for this program and this process. We have about 23 staff persons in the county that have been working on this project, and that varies from project management and leadership. We have about 9 subject matter experts working on this, anywhere from legal advisement to logistics to our strategy and innovation team, and our special collections team is working and providing data and research support. We have communication and public engagement. I also want to share that the Sheriff's Office has been providing, in collaboration with APD, security for our monthly meetings. So lots of resources have gone towards this very important work. All of the staff have full-time jobs, and so we have reprioritized our normal activities to center reparations for Black Buncombe County. And oftentimes that includes 2 to 3 standing meetings per month for staff and all the preparation and follow-up that happens from there. So just want to acknowledge the work that's happening in that space, and specifically the staff. Oftentimes I imagine when they see my name come across a Teams message or email or on the phone, they typically, wonder what else does DK want us to work on? And it's oftentimes reparations work. So thank you, staff. We did not provide any administrative funding for the commission, but we have reprioritized general fund funding so that we can respond to needs that come up for the commission. That includes procuring virtual meeting technology so that the impact focus areas in community could do virtual meetings, stream their meetings if they would like to. Communication engagement activities, and a lot of the components of the summit that was so special to the community was funded from our reprioritization of general funding. You all also expanded our funding in CAPE so that we can make sure that the youth was included in this work. And so we have Slay the Mic that's working on a youth documentary project, and it includes our Black student unions. Additionally, you provided additional funding so that we can ensure that we provide the data and research necessary for this project through the expansion of library special collections. When I was before you maybe a few months ago, giving an update on the Reparations Commission, I talked about how when a group is coming together and trying to establish themselves to do the work, that you go through these phases, right? Talked about forming, norming, performing, etc. What I might not have made completely clear is that oftentimes the group will move back and forth in those phases depending on any changes, significant changes or small changes. And so I wanted to come and give you an update on our project management changes. One of the things that we did when the initial project manager left the project is we built a really strong staff support infrastructure so that if any changes happen going forward, that we minimize the impact to the Community Reparations Commission. And so in advance of the announcement from Christine Edwards in October that she was changing her role, we were able to pretty quickly provide the support that was needed. So that change here you see, Christine Edwards is staying on to provide project administration. One of the gaps that we saw pretty quickly would be that we wouldn't have someone to facilitate those meetings on a monthly basis. Now, we have strong facilitation staff with strong facilitation skills, but we thought it was very important that there be an external, independent person guiding those meetings. So Renisha Crawford from the Trauma Informed Institute is providing that facilitation. And I won't read through here, but all of the other folks on here have been people that have been supporting this project from the very beginning. Absent, the city of Asheville is appointing, if they haven't already, appointed a new equity and inclusion manager who will handle all the communication. So things like posting agendas, sending out information to the commission. Before I move forward to community and public engagement, do y'all have any questions about the work that staff is currently doing or any of the changes that we've seen over the last couple months? No? All right, so communication and public engagement. At the last Community Reparations Commission meeting, staff provided a pretty extensive update on communication and public engagement. I think oftentimes when you're in the work, you sometimes forget how much has happened. And so after staff provided this presentation, the commission members were very thankful that they were reminded of the work that they've been doing in community and the support that they've been getting from staff. So this is just an outline of some of the work that has happened around communication and public engagement thus far. That includes media relations, also includes speaking opportunities and community awareness updates. One of the things that was pretty clear is that there needed to be dialogue. And so project leadership and some of the commission members have also gone to these different events to talk to people in the community about what's happening around reparations. So just wanted to share that. What you will see moving forward is more on the ground conversations around reparations. Our youth, Slay the Mic, is going to be going to all of our IFAs and actually having conversations in community and broadcasting that out to the general public so folks can know what happens. I think I've shared with you all before that the work really happens in those impact focus areas, and they're not streamed on a monthly basis. So we want to make sure that everybody's aware of the work. All right. So the extension request, as I mentioned before, it is for an additional 8 months to do this work. At the September Community Reparations Commission, an individual member of the commission provided a proposed resolution to extend the Reparations Commission for 2 years. So that would mean April of 2026. And the resolution talked about, in order to develop and implement reparative measures, it did not provide any specific detail around what that would look like for an additional 2 years. And so staff asked at the next meeting, so no action happened in September. In October, staff asked that if the Community Reparations Commission was to submit a request to extend for 2 years, we need to be able to provide our county manager, city manager, as well as our governing bodies with what would that look like? What does that mean to extend the Reparations Commission for 2 years? At the November meeting, the need for a justification was questioned, and so they asked that we move it forward without a justification. So we agreed to do that. Before I talk about our response to that request, I just want to pause and see if there are any questions about the request. Again, no justification was provided. One of the things that we did in coordination with the city of Asheville is reviewed our timeline again. We reviewed the activities that would need to occur in order to complete the charge. And based on that, we have a response to share with you today.
DK, the question I have, and I've watched all these meetings as much as I could, my patience allowed me. But the question I have, what will we get for 8 more months?
Yes, so that's the question we had, and we asked, we wanted to have that information to bring forward to you. And though it wasn't provided, we did take a look at what it could look like any number of extension. We do not believe an 8-month extension is warranted based on the project timeline. But we do think that based on a couple of different factors, a 2-month extension would be warranted. I will also want to share with you all that no action from the board is required to extend this work. You all made your appointments, but you did not have a term for those appointments. So the folks that you appointed to this commission can continue the work until the work is done.
DK, can I ask you a quick question? Is there anyone here from the Reparations Commission or even whoever it was who made the request for an extension here to offer us some insight about
No.
why there's a 2-year extension without any justification, or?
No, it doesn't appear that anyone's here from the commission.
And they were given the opportunity to do that? To attend today or to provide some?
No, we didn't invite anyone specifically to attend the meeting today, but they were given the opportunity to provide the justification to you all and to the city council. Any more questions before okay. So in the review of the timeline, I want to share that we are on track to make the April timeline, with the exception of the fact that we didn't anticipate that an audit would need to be done. And so the cease to harm audit is currently being done, and they're going to provide their preliminary recommendations to the commission in January, and their final recommendations to the commission in February. And so based on that, we do believe that an additional month or so may be needed for them to review those findings and to integrate those in their current recommendations that they have. In addition to that, we are providing some additional support so that they can do more community engagement. We're data mining all of that feedback that we've gotten over the last 2 or 3 years so that they can review that to refine their recommendations as well. Those are the main components of our justification as to why we should extend the work through June 30th, 2024. Oh, I already made it there. So this slide talks more about the work that's going to be happening from November through March. Each IFA will be refining their recommendations in their monthlies. Some of them have meetings twice a month. Staff will be available to provide any clarification on any of the feedback, because we've reviewed them and we've provided feedback to them. Staff will be available for that. And then at the monthly meetings, they'll be doing a deeper dive in the IFA recommendations. We're looking at switching those meetings to less of a structured dais-type meeting to work sessions so that they can speak more freely and have dialogue across that. So that will happen November, December, and January. Again, the cease to harm audit preliminary findings will come out in January, and then February, the final report will happen. So based on all those things, we are recommending that county staff continues to provide in-kind support through June 30th, 2024 for the project. All right, I'll take any other questions that you have or comments.
I'm supportive of the staff recommendation. It sounds, if I'm understanding, you're recommending that staff extend what they're doing to help up until that time in June, and then the commission can continue for however long. Am I understanding you correctly? But staff would help up through June of 2024.
Yeah, so ultimately, it's the City of Asheville Reparation Commission. They also did not put terms on any of their appointments. So the terms do not end. So you don't have to take any action to end their terms or to extend it even to June 30th, because right now the project timeline is through April 2024. So no action from this body is required to do that. What we're proposing that staff will continue to provide the level of support that I described here through June 30th, 2024. The city council will have a discussion about this at their November equity committee meeting, and then city staff will be providing a similar update to the city council at their December 7th meeting.
Thank you for the clarification. So I support staff continuing to help through June of 2024.
So Commissioners, I do want to clarify the one statement that DK just made. At the level that we are now with about 23 folks, if this does go on before our Office of Equity will continue to help out, but the level of staff engagement with every IFA every month would decrease a little.
After June.
We're hoping to move towards implementation of some of those recommendations instead of still studying the recommendations.
DK, I appreciate you giving us the context, the backdrop for everything that happened up to this point, including why you're making the recommendations that you're making. I suppose I'm open-minded about where we go next. I think staff's recommendation makes sense, but it's a little difficult to assess necessarily until we know what the 2-year extension would have been. If someone had been here to explain what that was, we would know if we even need 23 staff members on it, if this is going to be 2 years worth of more passive discussion or trying to flesh out something that doesn't require all hands on deck from the county while the board, the commissioners there are sorting out what recommendations they want to put before us. I have no problem with them continuing to deliberate, but it seems like an open-ended request without very much clarity on what's going to be needed over the next 2 years, and I really would love to see, to the extent everyone else is interested, I'd love to hear what they would like to do. The justification would be helpful. I don't want to close the door on that if there's some specific need, but it's really difficult to assess what that is without someone present. So could we invite them to a later meeting and maybe readdress that portion of it with the justification or someone present to explain something about that? Or if there's any appetite from other commissioners on it, I just feel like I'm lacking a piece of the puzzle here.
If that would be the will of this board to hear more about that, again, we did request that they provide that, and there was pushback on providing any justification to that request. So staff can certainly go back and ask that, based on your request, that they come forward and provide a recommendation or justification.
That actually kind of answered my question. I didn't know if it was just it was not clearly expressed to them that they could come present that, or if the answer was outright no, we're not going to present justification at all.
Yeah, so we tried to explain why you all would want some sort of justification as to what would happen, the how, the what, the when, what does that look like to extend the Reparation Commission for that period of time.
Well, I'm for, if they can't justify it, let's end it when it was supposed to end. I've been watching this, and I've been hearing from people in the community. And look, this is something I've been looking at all my life and active in. But when I look at this process, and thank goodness for the staff, if it wasn't for the staffs involved, we wouldn't have anything, really, from what I've seen from the group. But I really think that it's time. If they can't give us justification, let us bring it to an end. Let the staffs take over. Let us look at what we can come forward with. Because frankly, I don't think the group is capable of bringing anything to an end. And I've watched it. I mean, they are not doing, it's a waste of time going forward. Look, this is an insult to my ancestors. to see what's going on, to think how people have fought and died for us to be where we are today. And then when I see that group, I'll stop with that because they are not going to get anything done. And I think the idea that we came up with from the council and from the commission is great. We can get something done. But now I think that group has become a barrier, and it's time to move them out of the way. Okay, they have done a good job churning the sausage, so to speak. But now let's let the staff and the chefs take over. And that's the commission and city council, because we're the ones that the people have voted on and put us in place to get something done. But if this is going to be a successful project, if we're going to see some results from it, we've got to go another route. We can't continue the way it's going.
Right, any other questions or comments? Again, we're not making, we don't have to take any formal action here today. It's a briefing. Any other questions or comments? I guess just, though it was observed that when the members were appointed, there was not a specific term for them. But don't we, so maybe that was an oversight on all of our parts, but we do have sort of standard terms for serving on commissions. And I think maybe the reason it wasn't included here is that I think the idea was that this was not a permanent commission, but that there was like a task was to be done, right? Let's get ideas, let's develop specific recommendations and to report them out, and then the work would be done. There might be other things that then come after that to move it into implementation mode or something else, some other structures may be needed, but this was not envisioned as an open-ended and permanent set of appointments. I'm saying that, but it's really a question. Like, is that a shared assumption, or is that not a shared assumption at this point?
You're right. The charge was to come together, an ad hoc commission to come together and to provide recommendations. That charge also included that after the recommendations were provided, the board and the city council, depending on what recommendations were under your purview, would then decide how to prioritize and approve any recommendations to move forward. After that, we would move into implementation. So the commission's work would be done. And then we would move into implementing any of the recommendations that you all saw fit for us to implement in accordance with our budget cycles.
Okay, well, I guess I would just reiterate, that's still the way, I've sort of thought about this process. So I support the staff's recommendation, but if there is kind of this concept that this just keeps on going on and on, I think that's not a shared assumption, right? So, and if there is a desire to kind of make recommendations, but then also to keep this specific group in place on a more permanent basis, I think the city council and the commission would need to, because we created this process, right? So I don't think it can, I think if they want to propose making it a more permanent group or open-ended, that in addition to not providing this level of staff support, I just think we would need to talk about that, because that was not the idea when this was started. So.
That is our understanding as well.
Okay. And is the city council also kind of considering the same question or set of questions?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts or comments for now? Okay, DK, thanks for the updates. Appreciate it. All right. Rafael Baptista is here to help us with the Q1 strategic discussion updates.
All right. And I apologize for my voice.
Okay.
It just means less corny jokes for you all today.
It's going around.
So we're actually going to talk about the 2030 plan real quick, and then I'm going to pass it off to our subject matter experts on the Q1. So as much as we all love the current plan, it does end in June of 2025, sadly. So we will have to develop a new plan, the 2030 plan, which will not be truly a new plan, but rather a substantial update to the current plan. So essentially, it's a living plan that gets updated every 5 years. So the timeline that we're proposing is to kind of kick it off majorly in February with the community survey. We did that 2 years ago, so we're up to do it again. We'll kick it off internally with staff in terms of preparations in March. We'll do a survey of you all in April to get your thoughts and feedback. We will then go out to the community for community input and staff input. We'll do a kickoff retreat with you all in August. And then we'll start doing public and staff feedback. And our aim is to have you all adopt your new plan in December of 2024. So between that August date and adoption, you will get 2 to 3 drafts of a plan that we will update based on your feedback. So the question for you all today is this a timeline that you feel comfortable with? And this plan will be staff-led based on your direction. So it's your plan, and staff will facilitate the development of your plan. I will note that in December 2024, the adoption inherently means that if there's turnover in the board, the newly elected members of the board will be the ones voting, not the members cycling off the board. So appreciate any direction or feedback today.
So just, new members will be sworn in, what, like the first Monday of December or something?
Yep.
And then when would the vote take place?
Avril, I believe it is that same meeting, correct? Or is it the next one? Yep. It's the same meeting.
So that's the point of discussion for the board. If you want to have this in that December meeting before you guys cycle off, or you wanted to move it into the new year for the new members to get a little bit more familiar, and then vote. So that's really a point of discussion for you. Our plan this will be effective July 1st, so they do have some time to have the new members to become familiar with it. We also believe that as we're going through the process, those members typically come to meetings anyway, so we're making sure that they're aware of what's going on as well. But that will be a point of discussion for you today.
I think it's pretty obvious we should do it.
Wouldn't you-
Partly kidding, partly not kidding.
Well, if that were the case, wouldn't you need to have the meeting, the adoption at the last
November.
meeting in November then?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do, maybe a little bit self-serving here, but I do think that folks who've kind of gone through the process and been involved in it, it does make sense for them to then sort of formalize it. So I do think there's an argument for that. I realize that it'll be the new commissioners who come in who actually have to do stuff, if they're, to the extent there's new folks on the commission. But that does make kind of more sense to me from a process standpoint, rather than kind of going through all this and then folks who haven't been on the commission immediately kind of stepping into that decision at like their first meeting. But there's probably arguments on both sides.
No, I agree. I think if we start to use the justification that we have to wait for new people, then we end up hamstringing ourselves in a lot of ways every time we tackle a new project. So I think we have to make some firm decisions on when we want to do it. So I agree waiting or doing it at the end of November makes the most sense.
Yeah, the second meeting in November, I agree. That would be the time to do it.
Thank you for your feedback.
All right, let's talk about the current plan then. So first up, we have Tiffany with Educated and Capable.
Good afternoon, Chairman Newman, Commissioners, County Manager Pender. I'm here to talk about educated and capable work. As you know, in this part of the strategic plan or focus area, we have 4 different goals. including increased kindergarten readiness, increased third grade literacy, improve college and career readiness, and then protect older residents aging in place, and some kind of, I think, good news. In this quarter, we are at 76% of our goals being on target. Specifically, we have things that are working well when it comes to community engagement and empowerment. We've been able to increase informed voting, voter registration and participation, and poll workers 65 and older. We've seen Justice Services developing a new program for a youth justice clinical program, which is school-based court referrals. We have been working towards building out restorative justice practices and health-based responses to violence. In our family and parenting support, HHS Child Services has completed 23 cohorts of Circle of Security Parenting. We have improved our education and literacy promotion, with the libraries increasing free educational services for all communities. They've launched 1,000 books before kindergarten program, increased ebook rentals, and expanded the preschool outreach project and have 30,000 streaming titles. And then Strategic Partnerships has 33 ongoing projects to improve educational outcomes for community, early childhood, career development, family engagement, literacy, and tutoring. But as we do this work, we always face a little bit of challenges. So these are some important items for discussion in this focus area. Our challenges in program management, the lack of future clarity for our active aging center, school management transitions, workforce shortages, things that you all are familiar with. As it relates to our child and youth support, just the lack of childcare for most vulnerable populations and not having access to vouchers, increased need for alternative pathways for youth involvement, especially coming out of the pandemic, and looking at where our schools and our youth need more resources and supports to continue to thrive. And then in our library and community access, just a lack of library materials for homebound and older adult populations who are not able to get out to the library, and just the hours of operation that can be limiting. And then fewer served children due to the school workforce shortages, the vacant position with teachers and assistants. So that's the forecast for educated and capable. I think we want to do discussion after the focus area. Oh, we do it now. So if you guys have any items in this, any discussion for this focus area in particular.
Thank you. One of the goals I specifically wanted to dig into a little bit more and get more information on going forward was the improved college and career readiness, because that one says we're not on track. And that impacts so many things within our community. So I'd really love for us to reach out to our school partners and see if there's any specific programs they're working on or that they know of that can help improve with that. I know when I was looking on the county health rate rankings there, that report, they rank different practices by the evidence base, and one of those was the career and technical education for high school completion around graduation. And I'm thinking there's probably some programs out there with that may already be in place. Maybe there's some other things we can do with that. And then the school-based health centers, I went to one of the openings recently. That was at Irwin Middle, and I think they're getting ready to open the Inca Middle. And that also seems like that's going to have a very important impact on our schools because that's helping the students, the staff, and the families in those schools. So those are a couple areas that I'd definitely be interested in knowing more about, and how we can get ourselves on track with the improved college and career readiness.
And that's something we can prepare and present back, what is already currently happening in those focus areas and what are some opportunities for improvement.
Okay, thank you very much.
We also need to look at maybe refining what college and career readiness is, because this encompasses a lot. It isn't just CTE, career and tech ed programs in my mind, but when I look at this, I'm also looking at the number of our high school students who were dual enrolled across our school districts, particularly at AD Tech. And that's a lot of students, and those students that are enrolled do tend to then continue their degree at the local community college or transfer those credits to a four-year institution, which does mean that they are college and career ready at that point. So we might want to refine that, and we might see our actuals shift just a little bit. We might, I'm just thinking of maybe rethink how we view this in terms of success for our high school students.
And that's a perfect segue for a 2030 plan.
Great.
And as we're looking at our 2025 plan, we realize there's lots of gaps that we didn't have on our goals. So that's one thing you'll see us do a little bit better in our 2030 plan. Thank you.
I also think that even as departments leading that goal, like we don't necessarily have connections with or operating programs. So we have internalized that to make it mean what it could for us. And those are some of like where our goals are aligned. Like for my department in particular, college and career readiness for us meant decreased juvenile justice referrals or criminal justice involvement. And so I think that's where aligning what we're able to do with what the goals are is important too.
No, I really appreciate that. That's what was in my head, and you stated it much better than I was saying, Tiffany. I appreciate that. And I think as we do move into that next cycle of our strategic planning, we need to take a really hard look at, as a county, what we can really influence that meets our goals. It's great to say we want to do some of these things, but is it really within our purview? So circling back to, in that term, what matters in your arena, Tiffany, I think those are things we can influence. So just something to, I'm making a lot of notes over here for our 2030 plan. So thank you for stating that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for these updates. It's super helpful to kind of look at these dashboards. And I think the thing I just want to flag, which is maybe self-evident, but we certainly talked about it a lot during our budget process, is just that so many of the institutions we're working with on these are sort of in a fairly perilous period because of the lack of state funding, and in some cases, specific state legislation that is undermining their very ability to do what they're charged with doing, for like our public schools. So I just think it's important in any conversation about how we're measuring the effectiveness of the interventions that we're doing, many of which are incredibly innovative and impactful, like launching school health clinics or providing one of the highest levels of local investment in early child education and pre-K in the state. And yet we're just contending with cross currents of such magnitude because of the funding deficits that should be coming from the state. So I think the other piece of that, though, is that many of the strategies we developed were sort of against a landscape in which we had reason to think there might be improvement at the levels of state and federal investments in some of these. And we now know a lot more. We know things we didn't know when we crafted some of these strategies or some of these goals. So whether we want to kind of have that simply as a piece of context, or whether we want to reconsider any of these as we head into the final chapter of this strategic plan, I think is a question. And as we embark on the next strategic plan, I do think having that sense of, it's kind of a mix of proportionality and precision around the things that we're investing local dollars in relative to the magnitude of the challenge and where we know the most acute deficits exist seems really critical, particularly when we're thinking about everything from the early childhood to the K-12, educational experience for kids and families in our communities.
If there's not any further discussion, we can bring up the next focus area, and that is resident well-being, which I'll pass on to Victoria.
Good afternoon, Chairman Newman and Commissioners. Good to see you all. Victoria Reichard, Behavioral Health Manager, and I'm providing some updates around the resident well-being. The goals are around public transportation and increasing that access, maintaining cultural and recreational assets, eliminating deaths as a result of substance use, and reducing the jail population and enhancing public safety. We have about 8 departments working along these goals, and there has been lots of progress, and yet still working to see some progress towards our targets. So departments within the resident well-being have focused and seen several successes. We are increasing our collaboration between departments doing overdose response work. Multiple county programs are working to expand awareness efforts to educate community members on risks of substance use and resources available to reduce harm. There are also efforts underway to develop programming to support those who are not seeking traditionally available services and beginning to discuss root causes or interventions to address root causes. Public health has increased the distribution of Narcan, testing strips, and wound care supplies, as well as providing public trainings on how to use Narcan. All of our libraries are equipped with nalox boxes, and shortly after installation, we did have an instance of an overdose being reversed in our bathroom. The county continues to explore ways to partner with community agencies to serve parents with co-occurring substance use disorder and child maltreatment to help prevent children from entering foster care and providing a quicker pathway to reunification for those who do. The county's community paramedic program continues to foster relationships in the community and is working with law enforcement to strengthen partnerships and reduce jail population by connecting individuals to needed treatment and resources. Justice Services has partnered with youth-serving organizations to implement community-based public health response to violence. To date, over 20 individuals have been trained as public health worker violence prevention professionals. Public Safety Communications has been working to address staff well-being, including being the first county in the state to provide embedded responder services into 911 center staff. In efforts to increase access to public transportation, including public transit and paratransit services, the Planning Department continues to see ridership climb over recent months, particularly as staffing levels remain at full operational levels. Mountain Mobility continues to improve in reliability and had its highest level of ridership since February of 2020. As Recreation Services has been working to expand and maintain cultural and recreational assets, the CORE, which is our Community Outreach and Recreation Experiences programming, has been developed to create mobile recreation in underserved and underrepresented communities. So at this time, we do not have additional updates on overdose deaths since we last presented. However, since the work around eliminating deaths as a result of substance use is using data to help inform responses, we wanted to share a snippet of information from EMS around opioid encounters. This graph shows us the number of counters EMS had associated with opioids. This is primary 911 units only, not including community paramedics, as they came on in the middle of this timeline. The green bar shows the total number of patients per quarter. The red line is showing the growth rate between quarters, and the dotted red line is showing the trend of growth. We are seeing a downward trend in the growth rate of EMS encounters for opioids. However, not sure what just happened. Not sure if that, what happened, if I clicked, but at the same time, we are seeing a slight increase in the growth trend for the encounters that required the use of a device to help breathe for a patient. So these numbers could be higher due to our current data collection processes, and there could be many factors associated with this growth trend, such as xylazine having sedating effects and not responding to Narcan, or patients having other comorbidities. While we may be seeing a reduction in the growth rate of opioid encounters, we are seeing an increased need to provide airway care, which can prevent death or reduced quality of life. So this is important that we ensure everyone is getting the right care at the right time. So again, wanted to share you all at least some information that we're starting to really look at and evaluate, and that's an ongoing work in progress, but want to open up if you all have any questions.
So maybe a little bit of clarification on the data. So it's a reduction in the rate of growth. So it's growing, right? So we're not saying it's going down or reducing. It's not. It's increasing, but the rate at which it's increasing is not as much as it used to be.
Yes. But we are seeing more advanced needs to respond. So they are more likely for a fatal overdose, but again, that frequency is reducing. Yes, go ahead.
I would also add that because of the community paramedic, what we're seeing is when EMS does have an encounter, the likelihood of the patient having to be transported to mission has gone down because we're now able to provide more interventions on scene with our community paramedics. So we've actually seen, I think it's about an 8% decrease in the number of patients requiring an emergency transport to mission. So growth down, overall rate still up, but what we're seeing is we're getting better and better at dealing with opioid encounters on scene and leading to better outcomes.
Can I ask you just a practical question about that? Are we accounting for situations where there might be some other incentive for someone not to go to the hospital, for example, transport fees or just fear of waiting forever and a half somewhere, or what other things are we considering there? Because I don't know the cost that would be associated if you declined transport as opposed to just accepting them, reviving you, and are we following up the right way on that?
Yes, so it's not that we're transporting less, it's we're transporting less emergency. So what that means is when we're transporting, the severity of the patient is significantly less because we better manage this care on scene.
Excellent. So it's high-quality care being taken care of. I just wanted to
Yep.
make sure that part
Yep.
was clear.
Am I correct in that, Will? Yep, okay.
Thank you. We will.
Thank you.
That's okay, you don't have to know the order. You just have to know when it's your turn, right? Environmental and energy stewardship. So we have two goals for environmental and energy stewardship: reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and preserving farmland and environmentally sensitive tracts. As our reporting period, Q4 '23, 92% of departmental goals are being achieved. I like that. It's a nice number, seems really positive, and leaves just a little bit of room for improvement, so it's perfect, right? You guys have heard me talk many times up here about solar, and you've heard Jennifer talk many times about farmland preservation. So we want to talk about a couple of other cool projects that we thought we'd have going on. There's been a lot of talk and interest in transportation. As you all know, of course, this board adopted a resolution to move towards a more sustainable fleet. We had our first 5 EVs in 2023, and we've got 6 scheduled for delivery in '24. We've actually ordered a lot more than that, but that's all we've gotten. Procurement of vehicles is a challenge right now, and I think without going into it, you all understand that. But even more important, I think, at this point, though, is the development of the charging infrastructure necessary to support those vehicles as they do continue to come in. And so we've made a lot of progress. We have 32 charging stations deployed in various locations around the county. 6 of those sites are county-only. 4 of them there's a mix of sort of public and private. So we want to make sure that we're supporting public charging, but we also need to make sure that the folks that we're going to give these vehicles to have the availability to have fleet-only charging so that they can go about their daily operations. Another really exciting project that's just getting underway is the North Carolina Clean Energy Fund. So it's also called a green bank, but it is not a bank. So I like to just call it the Clean Energy Fund. It is, we're working with this 501c3 to essentially pilot a loan loss reserve fund that will hopefully create some really unique and interesting financing options for residential clean energy projects. So the goal here is to beat what the market currently is, what is currently available at the market, right? And in combination with that, sort of in parallel to that, is this Electrify Asheville Buncombe campaign. And that is sort of a community campaign to help electrify residences in Buncombe County. It's really exciting, and as we move forward, you'll hear electrification as a really sort of a catch-all term for like moving away from fossil fuel infrastructure towards more clean and efficient energy. And so what we're working on with this group and with the city of Asheville is to create a community campaign around electrification and a marketplace to have residents have a place to meet with local contractors and do clean energy projects in their home. So the idea is for those two things to kind of couple together, as well as for that North Carolina Clean Energy Fund to provide financing for those who typically haven't been able to access that financing, much lower credit scores and things of that nature, as well as, you know, obviously we're seeking as much external funding as we can. A lot of this is really prompted by the IRA. So we're looking at coupling all of the various things that are available, whether it's rebates, incentives, utility incentives, things of that nature, to try and drive down the cost of these technologies for folks as much as humanly possible. So just a handful of projects. I got one slide today, so that you got me for as long as you need me in terms of questions and things. But that's just a couple of really exciting projects that we're very interested in sharing with you guys, and I'm happy to talk about that, any of these projects or anything else on your mind.
Well, Jeremiah, just while you're talking about that, and thanks for sharing that overview.
Got it.
Can you talk more about how this will be able to benefit people in the community, especially those that traditionally might not be able to afford to just go out and buy a new heat pump or?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the vast majority of things like heat pumps, it's a great example. That's really the technology we're kind of focusing on up front. It's either the option to potentially switch people like off of an old oil furnace or something like that, or if they do have a heat pump and they need a new one and it's time for replacement, to get something new and much more efficient, right? But at the same time, we know that heat pumps tend to get replaced in an emergency situation. They don't get fixed until they break. Most people don't think about their heat pump until it's time and it gets cold and it doesn't work properly. So we're working with local contractors to ensure that all of those connections are being made, and that, you know, we're hitting it at the right time. You know, you check the weather, it's starting to get nasty out there. So we're trying to ramp this up right as the cold season happens. But like with any program we do, it's really, really important that we focus on those folks who traditionally aren't able to afford these technologies. And so one of the primary goals for this program is to seek external funding to help subsidize projects for those folks who can't afford it. So we're working with the State Energy Office right now to apply for funding through the CPRG, which is the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. Again, there's a lot of acronyms in the IRA, so I'll just throw that one at you. And so, you know, it's very important to us that as we do this, we bring everybody along with us. So, yeah.
Jeremiah, I think I have two different questions for you. First of all, thank you. Those are great updates. I wanted to see if you had an update on the fire, I forget what we're calling it, the volunteer fire department solar program.
Yeah, sure,
First question.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Just that all of the assessments are finished. We're working on MOUs with fire departments. And essentially, those projects should be out to bid here in the next 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, the holidays will probably slow things down for us. They usually do. But I would expect to have those out to bid after the first of the year at the latest.
You said how many?
There were a dozen initially. We had to remove 2 of them because they were not structurally capable of supporting solar. There was just some other upgrades that are going to need to happen on a couple of those older buildings. But
Likely 10 firehouses.
Likely 10.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay. And then in regards to the,
I have one follow-up
go
on that.
ahead.
Yeah.
I know we'll probably get asked by somebody.
Yeah.
Is it being bid out as a single project or
no,
individual
as an
fire
aggregated
stations?
project.
Hmm.
As an aggregated project. All 10 will be bid out at the same time.
my only other question was about, I guess, your third bullet on your slide
Mhm.
about electrifying Asheville Buncombe.
Yeah.
I could, if I could see the future, I could imagine that kind of thing being included in a future strategic plan update, that'd be something I would advocate for. I guess I'm just wondering if you have any high-level thoughts off the top of your head about what additional support that kind of thing might need, either from local government or state government or private industry, or
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're still.
what's missing?
It's a terrific question. and
Yeah.
We're still building it, right? So we're still very much in the development phase of what this thing's gonna look like. The idea in general is that there will be this online marketplace, so you as a resident could answer a handful of questions that would then, what we like to say is start you on your electrification journey, right? And the ultimate goal there is to say, we live in this kind of home, or we pay this much on average for our electric bill, this much square footage, we've got this type of heat, a handful of questions that could then sort of give us a starting point to say, we can connect you with a local contractor that can come out and give you a free estimate, that sort of thing, and then help you if you need financing. We've got this other mechanism to do that sort of thing. Where I think, again, and this goes back to Commissioner Wells' point, where I think the gap is in there are still, no matter how many tax credits and rebates are available, there are still folks that are simply not going to be able to afford these. These are still
Yeah.
big ticket items for a lot of folks. And so figuring out a way to subsidize the difference between what people, the rebates and things can drive the cost down, but there's still going to be a gap. So that's the biggest thing we're looking at, in addition, frankly, to just building those contractor relationships, ensuring that we've got good vetted contractors that we can point people to and that want to work with these programs, in addition to, again, working with the Clean Energy Fund to build the financing mechanisms available.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Jeremiah. Thank you so much.
All right, Commissioners, our final focus area is related to the vibrant economy. There's 3 goals in this focus area. Many departments support this focus area, including mine, as well as Health and Human Services, our tax assessor, planning. Our 3 big goals, the first one relates to land use strategies that place affordable housing near transportation and jobs. Our second goal is to increase median household income towards the North Carolina benchmark. And our third relates to total employment in targeted industries in our community. In general, as of Q4 2023, we're at 95% of our targets, so making progress there. Specific items for discussion, I was told to be brief, so I will be. In terms of increasing total employment in targeted industries, wanted to talk about growing local business in our community, and specifically the Mountain Community Capital Fund, which is a city-county partnership that's been funded by County Commission, seed funded in the beginning, but then through ARPA funding later as well. For the most recent quarter, there were 5 new loan guarantees for just that quarter, which brings our total amount of loans in the Mountain Community Capital Fund to $2 million, which is a really exciting number considering that our loans average between $50,000 and $70,000. So these are relatively small loans. That brings our total loan portfolio up to about 53 total loans, and these are all small businesses in our community. But really importantly, from our economy perspective, but also in terms of commission priorities, the equity that we see with these loans. And so the stats are on the screen, but I'll read them out. 97% of these loans have gone to Black or Brown-owned businesses. Specifically, 12% of that 97% are to Hispanic or Latino-owned businesses. And finally, 38% have gone to women-owned businesses. And there's some overlap in those numbers, but in general, the demographics have been really exciting. As a reminder, what this program does, I want to be very clear, Buncombe County is not in the business of loan administration or issuing loans. What we are doing through the partnership is working with our CDFIs, for instance, Mountain BizWorks, who does all the underwriting and issues a loan as they normally would. In this case, however, the Mountain Community Capital Fund provides a loan guarantee to make that loan less risky. And the reason these loans are considered risky at all to start with is often these are small businesses that may not have collateral and cannot go through traditional lending mechanisms. So, but for this program, these 53 businesses would not have received the upwards of $2 million in loan dollars that allow them to expand their businesses in our community. So a really exciting program. Looking forward to it continuing forward. Next up, wanted to talk about land use strategies.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Ask a question about that before we move on. So I think that's, I mean, congratulations to all the people working on that. That is super impressive, and I think it's exactly what we were hoping we would see, like when these proposals came forward and we decided to support them. So I would be, I would be interested in learning more about, as there's more experience being gained through the program, and obviously a lot of success here. I mean, again, like 53, more than 50 different businesses being, local businesses being supported is really significant. So what are the limiting factors going forward? Like, is like the amount of funding that's been invested sufficient to kind of keep this going? Or is that actually now kind of an important limiting factor? Or just, I don't know, any thoughts? And it doesn't all have to be for today, but just I'd be curious about, based on the success, how do we continue it and also build on it?
Absolutely. I think funding, of course, is a good thing. But candidly, we do have funds that have not been expended that have been awarded to the Mountain Community Capital Fund. So that's not the issue. What our committee's been talking about a lot is expanding our pool of lenders, and specifically to lenders that have, better reach into parts of our community. Nothing against those that we work with, but we feel that adding lenders with different portfolios, different niche markets, different folks that they get word of mouth sort of recognition with will help us. And so that's been our focus. We're actually actively looking at adding lenders now. But I'm glad to study that with our committee and bring anything back as we proceed. So.
Tim, maybe I missed it, but of the 53 loans, what's the average loan?
It's between $50,000 and $70,000 per loan.
How's the delinquency?
We've really excited. So we modeled this program off of a program in Mecklenburg County, and their reported delinquencies were 95%. To date, we've only had one loan default out of our 53, and so the math on that is pretty favorable, upwards of 95% for sure.
That's excellent. Yeah.
It really is, and a key component of the program is you're required to participate in technical assistance. And said another way, that's like business coaching, helping folks kind of get settled. And that's typical of a lot of our CDFIs, but mandatory as part of this program. So.
Good.
Right. Our final item relates to land use strategies, and just a few items to talk about here. So big goal, but said another way, it's about building affordable housing. And so that first bullet just talks about kind of the reality of where we are. Interest rates are changing, things are more expensive, supply chain is the excuse for everything. And so because of that, it's more costly to make affordable housing. And so we're seeing that, and I know you've seen that most recently, as loan packages are no longer good enough to deliver what was assumed just months ago. And so we just need to keep that in the back of our minds as we look at these projects and recognize that there's potential for change in the future. Additionally, Nate Pennington isn't here with me, but he would want to talk about the comprehensive plan and the implementation of that and the excitement of, one, having the plan adopted, but two, getting into the real work, which is the text amendments that come next. And so over the course of the next months and years, we'll see those text amendments, I think as soon as today, talking about what those text amendments could be, those changes to the ordinance that impact our land use and ultimately support affordable housing through density or through other tools. So those are the kind of headwinds. That's what's coming. If you have any specific questions on any of that stuff, I'm glad to discuss any of it, but I may defer on some of these more specific items.
At some point, I'd just be curious to know, I think the goal number one was the one that had caution by it, the implement land use strategies and encourage affordable housing near transportation and jobs. So I'd be interested to hear thoughts on how we can continue to improve upon that goal. And I do wonder, I mean, is there a way that we can work with our municipalities also to move toward that, improving our efforts on that goal?
That's great. And I think, we've talked about some projects today, with Ferry Road as well as other county-owned properties that we think will support that. But as we move into the next plan, need to be laser focused on that for sure. So,
I'll just echo that. I think there's great opportunities to collaborate with other public partners too. But as we looked at our own inventory of land and realized, well, actually, we ourselves own some very underutilized properties, so we should probably we should probably walk the walk ourselves first, right? But as we are kind of working through those initial projects and kind of launching them, then I think it does create more bandwidth to kind of go out to the other public organizations, the other local governments, and say, hey, look, there's a great model here that we've used on some of our properties, and let's work together on others. So I think you can't do everything all at once, but it does seem like a great opportunity. All right.
thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Great report.
All right, so we got foundational up, and then we'll talk foundational equity, and then Tiffany will follow up on the crime data and jail data from last briefing. So we are generally doing pretty well with foundational. 73% of goals are hitting targets, so that's good news. So the top 3 items to talk about are: 1 is capital and vehicle status. As Jeremiah said, it's really hard to buy vehicles right now. It's really hard to find sheriff's vehicles, really hard to find electric vehicles, really hard to find ambulances. So it's being very difficult to replenish our fleet. So that's an ongoing challenge. Also, part of the reality is as we move to an electric fleet, we also have to shift our facilities from a mechanical perspective and our mechanic skill set. All things we're working on, but challenges we know we're going to be addressing in the coming years. It's also, we're fortunate to have really great mechanics who've been here for a while. It is difficult to also hire mechanics in this market. Capital-wise, we have a lot of work to do to maintain our CFP at the rate it is. It's also becoming harder and harder to buy land in this county, even as the county. So dealing with those challenges as well. Really excited for a 2030 strategic plan. Really excited that staff in partnership with the board will be leading it. Allows you all to have more ownership over the plan. So excited for the next plan and to have one informed by a comprehensive plan. And then want to talk about a little bit about employee turnover. You all have made a lot of investments in our employees the last couple of years, new compensation plan, investments in benefits, a significant amount of COLA last year. So what does that mean for us? What result have we gotten? What's our return on investment? Our return on investment is a pretty significant drop in our employee turnover rate, going from 18% down to 16%. Our trend line is very good here. This is really exciting news. In the tough labor market, we're still being able to retain our employees. Something that we're kind of consistently looking at is the equity and the racial disaggregation of our data. So if you look at this, as much as our decrease in employee turnover is good, we do have to acknowledge that there are some disparities in our turnover. We can see here overrepresentation of Black African-American employees in our turnover rates and underrepresentation for our white employees. That being said, we also see underrepresentation of our Hispanic Latino employees. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag here, but this is something that we're paying a lot of attention to and that we hope the Cease the Harm audit and the work of our Racial Equity Action Plan will allow us to help address.
Could you just pause on this for a second?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm,
So the
Based on what I
orange
think I
line is
heard
the
you s-
turnover for that demographic group. So let's say for white employees, it's roughly 78% of the turnover of our workforce is for white employees.
so of all the people who we're
Who
losing.
turnover, about 78% are white. Now, if you look at our workforce, a little over 80% of our workforce is white. So that
Okay, so there's a
means-
disproportionately
Yep.
low, okay, got it. Thank you.
Now, none of these are massive, like very large changes in representation, but it's something that we are paying attention to.
Got it, thank you.
So that's the primary information here for the foundational goal. Happy to answer any questions.
Could you elaborate, so on one of the ones that says it's not on track is leverage and maximize technologies, plans, and studies to enhance the safety and capabilities of infrastructure. Is there something specific in that area?
Our facility work, so our facility study, because we've introduced the DFI study of affordable housing and some other things, some of the moves we had planned have been moved back. Also, the work with 35 Woodfin, those are the main drivers there.
Okay, thank you.
We actually had a couple more slides that came off the screen.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, excuse me, Chair Newman and Commissioners. I'm here to talk to you about equity in just a second when the slide changes. Oh, I do, it's on me, well then, there we go. So now the slide has changed. So the goal overview, we have two main goals for equity: to ensure policies and practices eliminate barriers to allow for equitable opportunity, and to ensure representative and inclusive practices are reflected in decision-making. Excuse me. So for our training and connection, we have our racial equity and LGBTQIA training modules. So far, we've trained over 1,000 employees that have received the racial equity training, which is an 8-hour training. Our Meaningfully Engage Equity Together, our MEET team, is instrumental in the development and moving forward with continuous development of new trainings that address different intersections, and adapting the learning is coming. So we're working towards maybe shorter videos that can be online, that can be on our BCU website to meet the needs of all of our Buncombe County staff that maybe cannot come in to attend these trainings in person, so that they can still get the support that they need. We've received some great feedback on those trainings, and we've had efforts to re-engage and increase attendance to those trainings. And as I've shared before, I believe we won the NACO 2023 Achievement Award for our racial equity training. Additional with training and connection, we have restructured our equity and inclusion work group to continue developing the work and support for the foundation we are building, talking about building the equity muscle within the foundation of the county. And we also have our affinity groups. We have our professionals of color affinity group and our BU affinity group, which is our LGBTQIA+ and ally group. And we've seen an increase in attendance and engagement. Recently, they had a speaker come and talk about professional development and future planning. We also had a physical and mental wellness meeting, and they learned a lot of information about, honestly, current Buncombe County health supports that are there, and many found that helpful. The BU group is creating a calendar of events and developing ideas that they want to be addressed and offered feedback. So we're seeing like I said, an increase in engagement, and therefore plans and processes are moving forward that will help reduce those barriers I mentioned earlier. Another part of our training and connection is our equity impact analysis tool. So we have revised that format from last year. This year we offered multiple trainings to Buncombe County department heads and supervisors. And then we even offered a pop-up clinic that honestly was very successful. that people could just pop in and ask questions as needed to prepare to use that tool for their budgeting process. So we had wraparound support. And so we're doing that to build equitable and inclusive considerations and practices throughout the budget process. Any questions there? So, our program and policy review and creation, our racial equity action plan goals are in department and business plans. The Equity and Human Rights Office team members have been going around to different departments, meeting with department heads, business plan managers to offer support, to hear what they're doing in their departments, but also to help assist in them reaching their REAP goals, giving praise for the REAP goals that they have reached, and helping offer ideas and suggestions for the REAP goals that are either inactive or have started but are not to completion. We've also created an information sheet with about 12 of the completed REAP goals that we've been able to share out with community members, and we're going to start distributing that among the county staff so they can see what goals are actually being reach and succeed. And also we are adding the impact. We got feedback from the community asking, well, how does this impact me? Yes, y'all have done this goal, but what does that mean for me? So on that same info sheet, we have information on how has this changed or how has this REAP goal being met impacted the larger community. Our Cease the Harm audit is well underway. The third-party review of policies, program, and procedures. They are providing baseline understanding on what we're doing, how we're working, and how it could be improved. As of this week, they've analyzed a little over 90% of all the data that's been submitted from city and county. They've been hosting cohort meetings, getting the qualitative data to go along with the quantitative data that they collected through the matrix. And we have twice-a-month meetings with Carter Development Group as far as city and county staff, and they're planning to have their preliminary report ready to submit in January of 2024. And lastly, in this section, policy review. Currently, the Equity and Human Rights Office, myself, have been doing reviews of current policies and policies that are up for editing and review. One example is the language access policy, access plan. Its first draft has been reviewed and is moving on to the second stage and getting other support and input from departments. The alternate workforce is one of many policies that we're reviewing to look for equitable and inclusive processes. And having an equitable lens is allowing for a rich and in-depth conversation to reduce those barriers and build in that inclusion. Recently, I have joined the policy management and steering committees, which is creating a space for additional conversation and expanding input. And then lastly, our community outreach. In the 7.5 months and beyond a little bit, we've put a lot of work and effort into reaching out to the community and sharing information about our REAP goals and just the equity goals in general within the county. So we have culturally competent substance use content. Our palm cards have been distributed. We have them in English, Russian, and Ukrainian. Thinking way too far out. And we're working on getting them translated into Spanish, but we have them downstairs when you first walk in. We've been giving them out at community events, at community-based associations, some of the lunch and learns that I've been going to in the past couple of weeks. So we're really getting those out and into the hands of people. So just a quick grab that they can get support and resources. We've been working on the community board memberships and stipends, looking into that process and developing a plan. The Reparations Summit was a great success on October 7th. There were more or close to 300 people in attendance for that, and we had a room full of BIPOC vendors. Mr. George Fothery gave a great speech and talk about how he was able to get land back for Bruce's Beach in California, and also provided some valuable information input to help our IFA groups continue to refine their recommendations. The documentaries on October 2nd and 5th were also a success. We had over 150 people at each one of those. The food trucks were a great success. It was a great way to just build community and for people to hear and see what was going on with our reparations process. And then we have our BIPOC mental health reach out, and so we've been reaching out to different BIPOC organizations. We met with 12 BIPOC mental health professionals to share and hear about the work they do.
resources they can provide, resources we can provide for them, and capacity. We've been talking a lot about we want to build and implement things and put things in place, but what is the actual capacity to do that? And how can we continue to do that work within the community? We met with the Racial Equity Ambassadors Program team from SILSA. I did that on November 11th, and it was a great conversation with many seniors and a few sophomores and juniors from SILSA at Asheville High about the work that they're doing within the school system and what they would honestly like to see us do more with reparations and just with equity in the county and city. So it was great to talk to them. And again, they received palm cards to hand out to their peers. And then just last week, we had a meeting with BIPOC nonprofits on November 13th, and we had over 35 different organizations in attendance. And it was great to not only be able to network and collaborate with them and discuss future projects that we can do, but also to hear what they need from us and for them to hear from each other to build some future collaborations. So that is where we are so far with equity and human rights. Any questions or discussion?
Thanks for those updates. It's really comprehensive and a lot of depth to it, so it's great to hear those updates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we doing exit interviews with everybody who leaves?
To my knowledge, I need to talk with HR. I know we have talked about doing that. I don't know if it's currently being done, but I can find that out and get back to you.
Yeah, because that's a good way to correct any problems we're having with people who leave. I know we cut out, at the bank years ago, we cut out from down about 40% when we started looking at why people were leaving and what we needed to correct. Yeah.
Got it. So I was just informed that we do offer them to every employee, but the reach rates are not that high. Great question, but I also will continue to look into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can answer that one, sir. We do offer it to every single person, but sometimes they've already left the organization and they don't always respond back. We're hoping that we can get notices and we can get to them before they leave. But right now they can give notice and it doesn't always flow through the chain to get to HR in time for them to do that.
For my edification, who does exit interviews? Is that with you or is that with HR?
That would be employee relations and part of HR.
All right, real quick, I want to briefly give you an update from the questions that were asked when I presented on our jail reduction strategies. So if Ben can put up that other slide. So it was two specific areas where you all asked for more information. That's failure to appear and the APD Operation Weekend Sweeps. So when it comes to failure to appears, overall bookings for our FTAs, like all bookings, have been decreasing since the pandemic. Most FTAs, only bookings, have orders for arrest that have been issued out of district court. Majority come in having original charge as a misdemeanor, which is the lowest level. The length of stay for these bookings are increasing, so they're staying longer for length of stays. And the average daily population have returned to pre-pandemic levels despite bookings remaining down. So the length of stay is the main driver. People are staying longer in custody. If you look at this particular slide on who's entering, you can look at the different various type charges. So these were the original top 10 charges. It was speeding, resisting officer, possession of drugs, mainly out of like 7 of them, misdemeanor larceny, and driving while license revoked, not impaired, and impaired. And you can see at the bottom, since 1987, and we've been kind of tracking, you can see the number of FTA-only bookings has dramatically increased year after year. And the percentage of bookings for FTA only is 16%. And this is how long they're staying, so that's also increased. The length of stay, the average day in custody for failing to appear is 12 days. And you can look at the different charges types on the slide that will account for what the average is. And if you look at the misdemeanors, altogether, that's about 22 days. This impact on the jail, so we looked at a snapshot in September. There were 54 people. There were about 59% that had a felony charge. But the OFAs coming out of district court, there were 34 people, and 63% of those had a misdemeanor as a top charge. And that failure to appear is 52 days. So sorry, I misspoke. This is the population in general remaining in custody, and then these are those who have pretrial charges and FTA only. And then the other consideration was the weekend sweeps. So most appear to be brought into detention on low-level charges, mostly second-degree trespassing. They stayed on average about 5 days. We also think this was impacted due to the new legislation where the magistrates cannot unsecure certain bonds. They have to go before district court, and this impacts the weekend stays because district court is operating during normal business hours. Currently, the impact on the jail is minimal, but it does appear to be contributing to the weekend bump, and longer lasting impacts could be expected if we begin to occur more frequently or if they are happen during the peak jail population times. And so this is an overview of looking at every day since October. In the month of October, you can see where the sweeps occur, where that weekend bump. So for example, on the October 5th, there were 378 individuals in custody. On October 8th, there were 401. Then you can see it kind of decline. It got as low as 350, October the 26th, and then it went back up to 374. Yes.
Thanks for these updates. So just, I'm trying to connect the dots between that set of data and then the FTA data. It seems like we're obviously following all this in real time, but it seems like there will likely be a fairly high percentage of folks who are being booked on these misdemeanor charges who end up with FTAs because of all the compounding barriers to showing up for a court date. And then it sounds like the data bears out that a significant percentage of people who have FTAs, or then the likelihood is they could get rebooked if they're picked up on the FTA.
I wouldn't be surprised that some that were picked up also had FTAs in the past and have been in custody for similar, and we can see what that looks like, because it is that revolving door. This isn't new.
So as we think about jail population, there's what happens when the initial arrest and booking takes place, and then a stay of an average of 5 days, and then there's future bookings that could result from FTAs that are linked to that arrest.
Yeah, especially if the cases linger
Yeah.
for months and years. The more court dates you have, the less likely you are to appear. So yes.
And then, so if someone is picked up on a second-degree trespass charge, booked, ends up staying in jail for 5 days, it sounds like that's a scenario we're seeing. What would be the typical sentencing for a second-degree trespass charge? Would you get booked in jail for 5 days?
You would either get an active sentence, the case can be dismissed, and usually those sentences don't carry an active jail time unless you have other compounding factors. I don't know if Commissioner Moore wants to speak to it as well.
That's correct. I mean, the main options are dismissal if deemed appropriate by the district attorney's office. Most oftentimes, in my experience, time served pleas. And the class 3 misdemeanors only carry a maximum of 20 days total. So that would be for the highest level individual, someone who's got 3, 4 plus convictions. And even then, that's the longer end of a sentence that you could give someone. I rarely see that happen in Buncombe County. Following up on that, could we, long-term project, I know this is not a quick turnaround thing, but I'd be curious to see how that correlates against some of our interventions, so for those individuals. I know some of that was alluded to in our last meeting, but really just making sure we're looking at, if we're investing significantly in trying to help people conquer the root causes of what's ailing them, be it housing, if folks are engaging with services to get themselves back on track, either substance use-wise or getting a job and all those things. I guess I'd be curious to track how that correlates against this data, so we can know how often people are having those efforts supported through justice services, or having some form of intervention there that might disrupt that process, so we can know how to most effectively use our funds in supporting our community. Is that something that we could look into? Maybe not by next meeting, but going into the new year.
Yeah, I think we need to look at what data is available to see if we can draw that correlation between what was presented and the program. So I would definitely get back to you and let you know if we can.
Sure.
That in my mind is more of along a personal person and tracking that person through to see, did that person get arrested? Did that person get services versus an aggregate number? So that will take some digging to see what we have available.
And I wouldn't want like a super detailed one in the near future. I'm thinking something along the lines of, if you open a case management file for someone and we know that we've given you a cell phone and your court dates are, you're improving in terms of your attendance of court dates, maybe that's where we focus that energy a little bit more.
All right, any other questions for now?
Thank you.
All right, hey, thank you for the additional information. All right.
Do you have one quick item on the calendar?
Yeah. Let's look at the 2024 meeting schedule. I've got it printed out here. Avril, any specific thing you would call our attention to on this?
I'll turn it over to Lamar.
Yeah.
Or Lamar? Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a tentative schedule. This is typically what we do. And I just want to call to question just some typical things that we typically do from year to year. The July 2nd meeting, we typically cancel the first meeting in July because it kind of correlates with the July 4th holiday. So that is one item, as well as the November 7th, which is a Thursday, because election is November, the presidential is November the 5th. So we typically move our meeting to that first Thursday or that Thursday after the election. And then the December the 2nd is a Monday, and we approve that by resolution because that is organizational meeting day where we swear in the new commissioners as well as appoint a vice chair at that meeting. So I just want to call to note, if there are no questions, we can have this on the December the 5th on consent agenda for you to pass. And it is tentative, so we just kind of get your blessing. And then if we need to make some adjustments during the year, we will. And are there any questions?
I do have one other comment too. January 2nd happens to be the first meeting of the year. And I don't know if you guys wanted to have that on that day or switch that at any point as well.
I'm fine with it that date. I mean, if it were January 1st, I'd probably say no, but January 2nd, it's okay with me. But I don't care. I mean, if y'all want to, anybody not want to do it that date?
January 2nd's fine. My only comment was on April 2nd, following along spring break with the local K-12 schools. I don't remember if we moved that this past year or not. Okay.
Let's come to that next. So that's the week of spring break that week. Yeah, I mean, folks do go out of town sometimes with family for that week. I mean, I know I've been in that situation sometimes before, but I don't think we've ever actually moved it, have we? Or did we? Did we one time?
We haven't. Officially, we haven't moved it. There may have been some commissioners that didn't attend that meeting or things of that nature, but we haven't actually rescheduled that meeting or canceled that meeting.
I think we have canceled an affordable housing committee meeting before. Well, let's maybe just make an, I don't know, I mean, I would say like, let's keep the agenda light that day, if possible. But, because I think it is not unusual for some commissioners to not be here because of family travel plans that week.
And once again, this is a tentative schedule. We never say that this is in stone, so we can make some adjustments or cancel meetings and reschedule meetings if we need to. But this is really more so for the public and for us to have awareness of what typical dates are, the meetings are gonna be on.
All right. And spring break is that whole week, so we couldn't just move it to a different day that week, could we? We'd have to move it to a different week, which is probably not really a good solution. So we'd have 2 meetings back to back, 2 weeks in. All right. Any other questions or comments on this? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Slamar. All right, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back, get our regular meeting started.